welcome, welcome. High fives to all my subscribers and a subtle, yet directed nod to anyone bored enough to watch my trash who is yet to subscribe. In regards to my trash, I've decided to step it up a bit. As my regular listeners will know, I've been trying to get some chats going on. After too many whiskeys, having just had my Twitter cherry popped, I decided to make some vague waving movements over a Ritz. I tilted back my head and called out to our levitating linguini lord for a messenger. I don't need to tell you that I was immediately rewarded. Our sticky starch savior sent me an actual professor who does not yet know how crazy I am to have a bit of a chat. It is with great pleasure, excitement, and anticipation to learn and grow, basically to be shown completely wrong, that I introduce Professor Flynn. In a style that might be better suited to my background. In this corner, hailing from places unknown with a record of idiocy, the mass terror, the inarticulate imbecile, the one, the only, Afidemist. And in the other corner, the champ, the professional prof, the provider of proofs, the arbiter of arguments, the origin of all legends ever told, Professor Flynn! Flynn. Roll the damn intro. Let's get this on. Hello, welcome. Professor Flynn, I want to offer my sincere thanks for appearing with yours truly. It is my great pleasure to have you here. I wanted to start off by letting everyone know that we very recently met on Twitter. We do not know each other, and I have very little idea as to where this is going to go. With that in mind, would you mind introducing yourself to all the beautiful people that give me a view from time to time?
I will introduce, thanks, Afi. I will introduce myself not just to the beautiful people, but to the ugly people like me. And I'm trying to get my head to fit into my Obi-Wan robe.
Yes, I can move you around a bit, but
it's okay. So I'm Professor Flynn. I'm a professor in the humanities at a major research university in North America. And I would call myself, I was raised in a quite strict Catholic home. Mm-hmm. And when I was 8 or 9 years old, I was sitting in Mass one day, and it suddenly struck me that this was all baloney. And we can get into the details of that if you'd like. But from that day, I no longer believed in God. And I wouldn't have called myself an atheist then, because I don't think at that age it isn't even a question of age, it's a question of my culture and my community. I don't think I'd ever heard that word before. I didn't know there was such a thing as not believing in God.
Who does that?
What's that?
Who does that? Not believe?
No, exactly. So I kept it to myself, and it started to, I at least used to broach the topic occasionally when I hit, university age. I still got dragged to church for years and to prayer meetings, people speaking in tongues, all that crap. But I wouldn't even say I came out of the closet as an atheist until I was, oh my gosh, in my 40s, I guess, early 40s, late 30s, when I, like many people, encountered the atheist community on YouTube. The atheist experience, Sam Harris, before he kind of went weird. So now I am, and I I still don't know if I'm an atheist or an anti-theist, but I absolutely don't believe that there are gods. There aren't.
All right.
That's
Well,
me.
let's maybe use that. First, we've already chatted, you and I, once, I believe. Well, a couple times on Twitter, but once live here in a video chat, about an idea that I would like to introduce in this conversation: interruptions. I've already asked you if you would be okay with interruptions in the two following circumstances: when the other doesn't understand something, or when the other disagrees with something. I hope these are okay. I've been known to interrupt. So my first question is, what do you think of my authoritarian system? Sorry. Finally, before we jump into this, I probably owe you an apology, or at the very least an explanation. I'm of the opinion that we should test all claims. Claims I agree with, as well as claims that I don't. If I can, I would like to introduce any opposing ideas, which I may or may not hold, in order to attempt to convince myself of your claim, or have others hear some good reasons to change their beliefs on the topic, or just think about it some more, I guess. So just to be clear, if you were to say something like, we should not allow companies to make shrimp-flavored ice cream, despite wholly agreeing with that position, the damn water bugs, I will still ask why. Perhaps if we can get enough people to agree that shrimp-flavored ice cream is a horrible idea, the world might become a better place.
But even that wouldn't make it wrong, right?
Well, morality is coming up. It's
Can I just
damn
point
wrong.
out, in the spirit of friendly interruption,
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting that during our conversation a couple of weeks ago, we discovered that we have quite a few things in common beyond a love of professional wrestling. We also have in common that we're both educators, and we share a similar method or a similar pedagogy. We teach in very different, well, not entirely different, but in different areas. And we both, from what I remember of our conversation, we're advocates of the Socratic method.
Absolutely.
We want to test claims. We want people our students, but all people, to come to their own conclusions about not just what they think, but about what we think. So I often say to my students, I say it all the time, in my intro, on the first day of class, of any class I teach, I say it loud and proud: you are not required to agree with me in this class. In fact, just agreeing with me slavishly is not going to do you any good.
Absolutely.
The people who push back will almost always not just do better in the course in terms of a grade, but they'll learn more. And I'll learn more. That's one of the things I love about teaching, and you're the same way. We learn when we teach. That's one of the reasons we love it.
Absolutely.
So
I couldn't have said that better myself. Let me take some notes. So I actually wanted to tell you. You mentioned the Sam Harris getting interesting thing. I'd like to come back there, but you were mentioning your atheism, and I guess you've almost answered the question, but I want to dig in a little bit. How would you describe or define your atheism?
Well, this is why I would say, maybe as I was saying what I said a few minutes ago, I was sort of self-edited in my brain. I think in a way I've answered my own question, which I hope will answer yours. So I said just a few minutes ago, I am not sure whether I'm an atheist or an anti-theist.
Can you define?
But now I realize, I realize that I'm both.
Oh, okay.
So let's do the anti-theist part. I do not believe that theistic dogma is a good pathway to truth or to moral conduct. So I am against religion.
Is the word theist in that important? So, I mean, yeah.
Right, yes.
But what if we took the word theist out? Sorry, I've got a lot of hands.
It wouldn't be the same. And here's why.
Okay.
We could say anti-religion. And some people say that, the old thing, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. It's more than being against religions. It's being against the belief in religions. That's why I would say anti-theist. I'm also an atheist in the most common, garden variety sense. I do not believe God claims.
I got you. What if I don't know what the example is. This is the fun of doing them live. What if flat earthers always woke up in the morning and walked around the block 5 times? That was part of their, I don't know, what they had to do. Would there be a substantial difference? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, isn't all dogma bad?
Yes.
Then is the theist label on here really important? I mean, it is. I agree with you. Because they do bad things, or things that I think are bad at the very least. But I think what you're going to find during this conversation, perhaps I'm completely wrong, is I'm going to try to take your arguments against Christianity, perhaps, or theism, and broaden the context. Because I think, and maybe this is where my atheism comes from or has gone, I think the problems that we see in these sorts of conversations, like theism, anti-theism, atheism, are actually the exact same sorts of problems we see everywhere. But
I agree.
That's why I'm bringing it up, I guess. So when you say atheist, do you mean that you have a positive claim that no God exists? What do you mean exactly by atheist?
My atheism is a response to the claim that there is not just evidence, but proof that gods exist. So I'm not making a positive claim. I am saying that I have heard the claim of theists and found it wanting. That I don't, I won't pursue that. But I just want to say, because I think your question about dogma is a really, really, really important question, and I agree with you completely. And in fact, my Twitter banner for quite some time was a play on, a beware of dog sign, and it was beware of dogma.
I like it.
And as I sometimes say to my to one of my colleagues, I am dogmatically opposed to dogma.
I like it.
And I've said this, and I'm going to explain why that's important, but then why I narrow it. So, I have, in recent days, especially in the aftermath of the shooting in Texas, I've been saying this I didn't know the shooting was going to happen, obviously, but in the days leading up to that, I've been saying loud and proud on Twitter that the United States isn't in danger of becoming a theocracy. It is a theocracy. But I mean that in the sense, not that it's a Christian evangelical theocracy, although it might largely be. It's really can you just say a theocracy of dogma, in that there are certain, as there are in religions, there are sacred texts and people, this sort of thing. So there's the sacred text, for instance, of the Second Amendment. There's the worship at the altar of Mammon, as it says in the Bible. There's the absolute worship of guns. So but the problem for me is, look, just attacking dogma, you will see if you look at my Twitter feed, I do two things. I attack theism and sometimes theists, particularly Christian theists, because I think they're the group I'm more familiar with, and that I think are really posing a clear and present danger that Islam could not begin to pose. What was I going to say? So it is blah, blah, blah. So in my Twitter timeline, you'll see me going after theism and going after right-wing American politicians. And if you draw the Venn diagram of those two things, and we know this, right, of right-wing and Christian evangelical and Christian apologists, that Venn diagram is like one color.
I want to take a couple steps back. Sorry for interrupting. I've understood and I haven't disagreed, but I'm really interested in this question and I don't want to lose it. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You
this
were
is great. I love this.
you were mentioning about America being a theocracy, and you were then mentioning that not really in a religious sense, but perhaps in a dogma sense or maybe an ideology sense. Certainly not a word that you used. The question is going to be something similar to a lot of theists in debates and arguments point out atheistic atrocities by pointing sorry, I'm not sure why I pronounced it that way, by pointing at like Pol Pot, for example.
Yeah,
And
I was going to mention this a minute ago. Keep going.
well, actually, that's the question. Could you speak to any similarities you see between what theists have called historical examples of atheistic murder, mass murder, genocide, whatever, and what you're now mentioning you're seeing as America as a theocracy? Is there a connection there?
It's the same shit in different pots, in different Pol Pots, if you will. So people talk about, the classics are Pol Pot or Stalin.
Sure.
Were they atheists? Sure. Hitler, not so clear, but certainly Pol Pot and Stalin, they were atheists. But they appealed to their citizens' willingness to give themselves over to dogma in a way that is indistinguishable, except for some of its minutiae, from the way that religions and churches appeal to their citizens or their congregations' desire to believe, right? To believe in something bigger than them, right? And it's Freud talked about this in Future of Illusion. It's been said, this is not original thinking on my part. People want to believe things. What's the easiest way to get this is something that Sam Harris has said. I'm sure people have said before him. If you want to get someone to do something horrible, they have to believe something.
Yeah.
And I would say they have to believe in something. So, Pol Pot's dogma, of course, it's different from any variety of Christian dogma that I'm aware of. But it plays upon, takes advantage of, manipulates the same instincts of our, we mere mammals, and often uses them to bad ends. It's authoritarianism at the end of the day. It's just, do you want, the Vatican version of authoritarianism, or do you want Stalin's version? Take your pick.
It might be tribalism at the end of the day as well. When you're promoting an idea that you want your nation to follow, that excludes the other I got too many hands again. That excludes the other nations. Yeah, these are topics that I always talk about. You were talking, and sorry for interrupting, about the connection that you see between the right and religious fundamentalists and stuff. If you want to continue, please do. My next question was going to be, do you see any common problems with atheists online or that you interact with that you'd like to point out? So I guess take your pick. Which one are you shooting at?
Look, I think that if anyone watching, listening to this doesn't see the overlap between particularly Christian evangelicalism and right-wing politics, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to convince them. So, it's to me, it's evident. I don't know how you can argue against it. It is, to me, apparent. Why beat a dead horse?
Any idea about the cause?
I'm going to decline. But what was the second?
Any idea about the cause of that connection? I mean, certainly the connection is there. There's a correlation, no doubt about it. There might be causation.
You know what? It's the connection between all such dogmas, I think. And this is going to sound horrible, but I've said it on Twitter plenty. I'll put it this way. In fact, I was asked this just today when I was accusing a certain person of being intellectually dishonest, and some Twitter theist, who I'd never, I think, encountered, replied with something to the effect of, and we've all heard this before, assuming that this person was being dishonest, what in your worldview makes that objectionable?
Oof.
And I replied and said, here's the thing. I have learned, this is learned behavior. I have learned that being honest is a good thing. I didn't learn that from a Bible. I don't have a scriptural foundation for that learned belief and behavior that lying is bad. It's something I learned. And here's the difference between me. I said this to the person. Here's the difference between me and you. I'm actually morally superior to you because I can think about, perform the moral calculus necessary to act morally in the world without making reference to anything, any ancient text. So I actually think about my behavior and whether it's good or bad. Whereas theists like this chump, they don't have to think about it anymore. And this actually is an answer to your question. He doesn't have to think about it. No. He just does what the book tells him.
It's easy.
That isn't morality, as I said to him. Dogs can be trained to not jump up on the couch. They don't understand why. They don't understand why it's wrong, but they can learn.
I still salivate every time I hear a bell. I got you. Yeah.
It's Pavlov's dog. But any, I think, dogma becomes a crutch. And it does have to do with tribalism. I agree 1,000,000%. You don't even have to go to dogma. You can look at research on street gangs, for instance.
Good example.
People break into street gangs or get broken into street gangs because they want to belong to something. The research it's 100% clear on this. Part of that, forming that tribe, adopting that group identity, is doing as they do and not thinking critically about what it is that you're doing.
I would love to pause you there.
That's what dogma does.
I would love to pause you there with a question that I don't want you to answer yet. I want to put it in the latter part. But just off the top of my head, as you're saying this, I'm not telling you anything. It's just an intro to the question, I guess. People have been saying the police have issues for years and years. And, obviously there's riots and obvious issues with the police. Do you think that what you are now talking about has something to do with, or could potentially have some influence on, the police acting, in some instances, in ways that we think are effing horrible? But I don't actually want you to answer that question yet. I want to get back to that. I think it is an important question, but I'm probably wrong. Yeah. The question, we'll kind of maybe finish off this atheism bit, is if you could change one thing about atheists, what is the problem that atheists have?
Oh yes, you asked that and I got on a tangent.
No, you're good.
So I'm going to answer it. There are a few things that I would criticize about atheists. I think I'm actually, something of a libertine, but I think that there is a libertine streak in contemporary atheism that I consider to be nasty and immoral. Yeah, immoral.
Can you define libertine for me, please?
So a libertine is a person who sort of lives in the moment for the pleasure of the senses, right?
Hedonism?
I want to get drunk and have sex with that woman. That's what I'm doing. And we've all heard the stories. We've heard the Lawrence Krauss stories. We've heard the Michael Shermer stories. These things are circulating around a lot. And, maybe some of them are, not completely factually accurate. But man, there's a whole lot of smoke. It's hard not to believe that there's some fire there. Is that good evidence? No. But I think, as I view the landscape, I see that, and that concerns me to some extent. Because I think that when any person expresses their libertinism without thought for others, this is like the do unto your neighbors you do unto yourself thing. Anyone who does that, atheist or not, who acts without consideration of the effects of their action on other, I would claim, isn't doing the right thing. I think it's worse for atheists because atheists really only rally around one idea, one issue. I wouldn't even call it an ideology. It's that we don't believe God claims.
I agree with
So
you. It's not an ideology. Yes.
it's not. So, but even to say things like, well, all atheists believe in evolution. I don't know that that's true. I suspect
I know
it's
for a fact
true.
it's not.
It's not, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that I think atheists share largely is a healthy skepticism.
Hopefully.
And hopefully, and I think virtually every atheist would claim to be, if not like a capital S skeptic, then at least to be skeptical, right?
But doesn't everybody, right? I'm a critical thinker.
Right.
I'm skeptical.
Yeah,
but right.
But atheists have a special responsibility to be skeptical because they claim it.
Okay.
And they have to include in their skepticism being skeptical of their own behavior.
I gotcha.
That is a problem for me in what I see of contemporary atheism.
Fair enough. I think I want to get back to morality, but I do want to I want to talk about the enemy. The enemy for a little bit. So
what do you have against my brother?
Nothing. It's your sister I like. So sorry. How would you characterize discussions you've had with theists in terms of, is there any kind of uniting or unifying thing, commonality that you've seen that you can point to, that may be good or bad?
Right. So I will borrow the fantastic distinction that Robert Reed makes. Robert Reed is a friend of mine. I'm part of a sort of closely knit group of Twitter atheists who have, gone into battle together many times. And Robert Reed, who is the host, by the way, of the Gin and Tonic podcast, which you can watch on YouTube.
Shout out to Gin and Tonic. I will do that.
No, it's not called Gin and Tonic. It's called Gin and Truth. Oh. But he drinks gin and tonic while he does his podcast.
While talking truth. I'm still on that.
And it's an amazing podcast. Robert and I were having a discussion with Gonna Go For It, Peter, who runs channels that include Herding Cats and Beyond Beliefs, etc.
Shout out to Herding Cats and Beyond Beliefs.
Last year, the summer before that, I can't remember exactly when. I'd been off Twitter for a while. I got suspended because, well, we can talk about that. But let's just say Christian apologists behaving badly got me suspended.
Okay.
And from Twitter, but I eventually got back on. Anyhow, when I returned to Twitter, I got back in touch with my friends. We did one of Gonna Go For It's shows, the Herding Cat show. And Robert said, this is a very long answer, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Robert, I said, in reference to a conversation on a live stream that I'd had with a Christian apologist, I said about that conversation that, although I didn't like it so much when it first streamed and I watched it afterward, I rewatched it before our live stream with Robert and Peter. And I said, you know what? I actually liked it more because, if nothing else, it demonstrated that it's possible to have an honest, good-natured, not just civil, but good-natured discussion with a Christian. And Robert made I steal this point every chance I get. Robert said, here's the thing. It's true that you can have an honest conversation with a Christian. It is not true that you can always reliably have an honest discussion with a Christian apologist, because they will do anything they can to win, as it is.
Can I stretch that out a little bit? So I would actually go, not a step further. I'd drive. Then I'd get on an airplane. I'd land somewhere, and then I'd take a step. I would say, myself definitely included, you cannot always count on an honest conversation. For example, if you were to bring up something that was very, very personal to me, and then criticize that, without maybe understanding the full facts, I might get a little upset about that, you know? And when I'm upset, I think like most humans, it's hard to rationalize and be critical and you know, just
You're upset.
disagree. All right, well then, I do like it.
But can I say, here's
please.
the thing. It's fine to get upset,
Mhm.
and it's fine to express that upsetness in response to what has been said to or about you. So that's totally legit.
Absolutely, we have emotions.
Now, the person that you have expressed that upsetness to has a decision to make.
Can we change it to
Are
upsettedness? I'm sorry.
Upsettedness?
Yes, yeah, please. Sorry.
That the person who has caused the upset has at least a couple of choices to choose from.
Absolutely.
One is to dig in and say, you know, the facts don't care about your feelings, or why should I care about offending you? Well, there are reasons to care about offending people. Another option is to say, you know what? I look back at what I said. I do this all the time.
Mhm.
I'll say, you know what? I look back at what I've said, and I apologize for it because I misrepresented you. I'm sorry. I'm a big apologizer. I believe in apologizing because apologizing leads you to the truth. So those are two options: dig in or apologize.
Okay.
The third option is to reply, as I would hope that atheists and skeptics would reply, and they would not interrogate the upset person, but simply respond to the upsetness by saying something like, okay, I don't understand why you're upset about this. What was it that I said that upset you? And then you can have the conversation, because without the conversations, we got nothing at all. I see, and I'm guilty of it as much as anyone. There's a whole lot of just, you know, knee-jerk reactionary shit happens on social media. You just bam, you know, it's all fight, no flight, and no asking for forgiveness. And I would like to see more of that. I try to do it. I don't always succeed, but I try. I can tell you, there are people out there who don't and won't even try because they can't cede that ground, which I find odd, especially from Christians and Christian apologists who subscribe to a religion that is 100% based on asking forgiveness for sinning.
They might say something like, "We're all born imperfect, though. So certainly I'm imperfect, and me not apologizing
that's
might
a whole
be."
other discussion. You know, let's not get into the whole. You know, I need to repent of the sins that I was born with because that's how God created me, and then He sacrificed his son, who is actually himself, to make up for, you know,
for a bad
none
reason.
of that makes lick of sense. But for people who belong to a religion that is so deeply and profoundly informed by the idea of forgiveness and asking for forgiveness,
and then not doing it,
to so rarely do it themselves is
hypocrisy.
It seems hypocritical. But you know what? I just said it seems to be hypocritical. I'm gonna actually, you know, you've driven your car, you know, back onto the continent, or you know, returned from space, wherever you were. I'm gonna back off from my hypocrisy claim and say this.
Okay.
I don't think often that these people can see that what they've said or done appears to be in contradiction or in conflict with their values.
Nice.
I honestly, that's part of the dogma. I don't think they can see it.
So I was going to ask you, I was going to start, and I was going to ask you to name one nice thing about the religious people. And what I was going to name is exactly what you just mentioned, that I don't personally hold the belief that there are very many religious people who don't honestly believe what they're believing, what they're saying they're believing. I mean, there's probably a couple TV evangelists and so on and such forth, other con men and whatnot. But I think the vast majority of people are trying their best to explain to you what they believe, why they believe it, that sort of thing. And I think there's goodness in that, goodness in that.
Yes.
Would you mind trying to cross the divide? And is there something that you admire about religious people? Stubbornness, perhaps? Sorry.
Well, I've often said on Twitter, if nothing else, you have to respect their persistence.
Okay, persistence.
But it's more than that. So, we're both intelligent people. And I would say that we run in intelligent circles. And it's very easy, I think, at times to think, and I say this to my kids sometimes, as a sort of cautionary, as a caution. Just remember, we are surrounded by stupid people. Now, when I say that, I'm being hyperbolic intentionally. Mm-hmm. Because as much as, it's easy to say, God damn, most people in general, theist, atheist, whatever, are stupid. If you look around, there are very few actually truly apocalyptically stupid people.
I'm going to have to ask you to define stupid. What exactly do you mean by it? It's a tricky thing. When we're talking about like math and we've got, two 25-year-olds and we test them both and one of them does very well on the test and the other one does very poorly. Certainly we might be able to say something like this one that did poorly is kind of stupid in math. Or
they're just bad at math. It could be an aptitude.
Yeah, exactly. What does it mean outside of that context?
So if and you don't have to accept this definition, mm-hmm. but if you accept the definition of intelligence as the ability to reason mm-hmm. and consider and manipulate abstract concepts and to think critically about whatever they encounter in their lives, if that's intelligence, then stupidity is the
not
opposite,
critical
right?
thinking.
It's the inability to think critically. Mm-hmm. It's the inability to think in the abstract about things. Right. One way of thinking about this is, there's The Onion ran a story one time. It was just a headline. Sometimes just their headline things are better than their entire
Sorry,
stories.
I was thinking, because it's got layers, donkey. Sorry. I'm with you now. The Onion, satirical.
But there's an Onion bit about, and for people who don't know, The Onion is this satirical newspaper. And The Onion ran a story or a headline to the effect, and there's a picture of like an infant with like a can of, I don't know, something, beans or something, and a can opener.
Yeah.
And the gist of the story is that that human babies are unintelligent because they don't know how to use a can opener, right? So the idea is they lock the baby in a room for 3 months with a can opener and a can of food, mm-hmm. and then they come back and the baby hasn't opened the can and has starved to death. They say, well, that's stupidity.
Yeah.
That is
stupidity. Sorry.
That is if you applied, by way of analogy, if you applied that example to people who can't apply the can opener of rational, logical thinking mm-hmm. to the events and people in their lives, they are like that baby.
So
that is stupidity.
The most obvious point, I would guess, is that I would assume you would agree that the stupid person, using your definition, would not know that they were stupid. They would think that they had come to good conclusions for good reasons, and that people that disagreed with them would probably be stupid, which raises the question, of course, and I'm not going to say begs the question, that's not what it means.
Right.
How do we know we are not those stupid people? I mean, me, I've got a wrestler's mask on, so I probably am. But you, how do you know?
Yeah. Can I just say, I don't have a mask on.
Yeah, there it is.
Which suggests that I'm the stupid one. Why wouldn't I cover this up? But I know what you're saying. And look, there are objective standards, as there are in mathematics. There are objective standards of logic and reason. And I'll give an example. Hold
on, you need this first.
One.
Sorry, you need one of those. I'm not even sure if you can hear that or not. You got some fireworks. You got some applause coming up.
I thought it was like a ritual drumming thing.
No, it sounded like you were quoting one of my videos. I'm gonna give you some fireworks for that.
So there is this quite intensely disliked Christian apologist, and I won't say anything I think about her beyond this. This person named S.J. Thomason.
Okay.
And she is a professor in the state of Florida. She's a business prof. And this is, I'm not doxing her. This is all public. You can see it on her Twitter. On
don't worry. No one watched my trash anyway.
So some years ago, Stephanie had this brilliant idea that she was going to call into the atheist experience and convince Matt Dillahunty that proof of the resurrection of Jesus and his divinity is that his apostles waited around for 3 days to come back and then preached his gospel, basically. And Matt said, couldn't they just have believed that he was divine without him actually being divine? And she said, and her argument was, Matt, what other reason could they have other than him actually being divine? And he said, as I said 20 minutes ago, maybe they just believed he was divine and they acted on that belief, but he wasn't, the people who flew, Matt said this, the people who flew the planes into the World Trade Center, they believed they were acting for God. How do you separate their behavior from, the apostles or whatever? So she kept saying, what other reason could there be? Whatever other reason could there be? And Dillahunty said to her, that is an argument. I can't remember if he said argument from ignorance or argument from incredulity, which overlap. But he said that to her, and that's a real thing.
Yep.
That argument, the fallacy of the argument from ignorance or incredulity. That's a real logical fallacy. When he presented that to her and explained it to her, she refused to accept it.
Yeah, so just to be clear to everyone out there who may not know exactly what we're talking about, the fallacy of appeal to ignorance is, I don't know what else it could be, therefore it must be this. And that just doesn't work. So, for example, I have no idea how else electricity could have got here other than, fairies. So, obviously, it's fairies.
I have a great example of this.
Please.
A real-life example. I used to live in a different area of the country, and I was moving and was selling my house to two sisters. And we had done all home inspection, all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was going to meet her at like a McDonald's one Saturday morning to like do the final sign the papers thing, right? And so I show up at the McDonald's, which was close to her apartment, and she comes in, and I could tell like something, like she was flustered, she was nervous looking, and I'm like, what's going on? And she said, someone was murdered right outside my apartment building. And I'm like, what? She said, yeah. I went out this morning, and like there are police there, and there's a body, and there's a sheet over the body, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, so there was what appeared to be a dead guy in front of your apartment building, but how do you know he was murdered? Yeah. And
what else could it be?
She said, well, and she said exactly that. She said, what else could it be? Right? So that is, you ask, like, how, who gets to claim that they're not the stupid ones? I think it's objectively true.
Hey,
and
actually,
it became
sorry,
more true.
You brought up...
I'm not going to call her stupid. I just want to say this. I wouldn't even say she's stupid, although she revealed that she might be in other ways. That idea of hers was absolutely stupid because it involved zero thinking. She couldn't use the can opener of her mind to open the can of the dead guy outside her apartment building.
So I wanted to, you brought up Matt Dillahunty. To the best of my knowledge, he claims credit for, and perhaps I'm wrong, for the Sir Conan Arthur Doyle fallacy, in naming that fallacy. Of course, the fallacy, as far as I understand it, is once you have excluded all the possibilities, whatever remains, however improbable, is the case, or something such as that.
Occam's razor. Yep.
Just when you were explaining the situation, actually, isn't that the exact same as the appeal to ignorance fallacy? The idea is, I have tried to find other explanations for it. Whether I've been successful in finding any other explanations or not is kind of irrelevant. I've tried and I haven't found any, therefore this is the truth. I'm just wondering if those are the same fallacy or not.
I think they're related. I think the distinction is that, I'll use the case of this woman, the dead guy. She didn't try.
She didn't even try.
She didn't ask the cop, any of the cops, what happened. She had an assumption and she ran with it. I'll tell another little anecdote, which kind of illustrates the difference between, not to say that I'm smarter than her, although, oh my God, I'm so much smarter.
But I'm not saying that.
but I'm not saying that. I'll let you say that. There was, maybe a dozen years ago. I was walking my dog late at night in my neighborhood, and I got to a street. There's a stop sign, and it's a street where you can't just go straight, because if you went straight, you'd cross 2 or 3 lanes of traffic, and you'd be in the front of a grocery store. You only have a choice to turn right or to turn left. So I'm walking my dog, and there's no traffic. It was late at night. It was probably like 1 a.m. And there's a car sitting there. It's still running. The brake lights are on. Foot has depressed the brake. And I walk with my dog, and I see a guy sitting behind the wheel, and he's slumped over. So my house is just a couple blocks away. I didn't have a phone on me at the time, but I sort of jogged home, and I called 911, and I said, I didn't say, there's a dead guy sitting in his car. I called and I said, hi, there's someone sitting in a car. It's running. It's not moving. And it's, in its proper lane and everything. And he isn't moving. I don't know what's wrong. But either, he's having a medical emergency and you need to come do something about it.
So where did you see this dead man,
there's
sir?
Something,
yeah.
Exactly. Or there's something else going on, and you ought to get here pretty fast, because if he's passed out drunk or something,
start driving, yeah.
You don't want him to wake up.
Yeah.
So by the time I jogged, so I hung up from 911 and I jogged back over the few blocks to where this car was. The car's still there, and the cops were just arriving, 2 cop cars, as I did. And I had to fill out a statement, all this, blah, blah, blah. Turns out the guy was drunk as a skunk. He was passed out drunk. He thought, when I asked the cop, who, if Kamai Tai, if by any chance you're listening to this, my friend Kamai Tai on Twitter, the cop I talked to was Maori, and I recognized that his accent was from New Zealand, not from Australia, so cut it to me. Anyhow, so I'm talking to this Maori cop, and I said, what's going on? Oh, he's drunk. And he said, the guy honestly believed he was sitting in his driveway. He thought he had pulled into his driveway, parked in front of his garage, and was just sitting there.
Right.
Now, I didn't make any assumptions about his state other than that he was incapacitated in one way or the other. I might have guessed, oh my Lord, Satan has come and stolen his immortal soul, and now he's just this lifeless, still breathing but not sentient being. Oh my God. I didn't make any assumptions beyond the obvious facts.
And that's most helpful to the police as well, just to get the facts.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just the facts, man, which actually Sam Spade never said
what was the
in
quote?
That show. That's apocryphal. I can't remember now, but I only know this because a few years ago,
or something like that.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, I was doing the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle, and it was all about, the theme was things that we attribute to people as having said that they actually didn't say. And that was one of the, was one of the things.
Interesting. I'd like to,
Trivia.
if you've got another, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, I'd like to take a short break. I've got a commercial pre-made. It's about, I don't know,
Awesome.
2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe hit the bathroom, and
I will
meet you back here in 2-3 minutes. And for YouTube, you will get the commercial.
Thanks.
All right, so yeah, just a couple minutes here.
Yep,
oh, and your mic will be hot. Sorry.
I understand. I'm
All
taking off my earbuds.
All right. Come on in. Okay, so look. I was supposed to give my usual shining example of education and competence. But, well, I had some problems on the way here, and, well, I lost all my notes. So, well, I was thinking maybe we could just have a chat. I don't know what to talk about, really. Oh, let's talk about the Force. Now, I know when I say the Force, even the Timmies in the room will know what I'm referring to, but I go a step further. I know it's real. Real. Like, really real. Yes, I hear the doubts. Okay, let's talk proof then. The movies, books, TV shows, music, literally everything was made in the past. Yes, things are being made now, but we won't get to see them until after they're made. So when we see them, they too will be in the past. This means that all of canon, literally everything, is historical. Now, I don't know about you, but I think learning about history is too important to just laugh off. I talk to lots of civilians all the time. They tell me outrageous stories about lots of different things. I have no idea how these stories could have happened. There's just so much evidence of this force all around us. How can you not see it? All notions of morality, peace, and justice come from the Force. This is clearly explained in canon, our history. To believe that there is no really real Force means turning away from these ideas, to turn to the dark side. The sheer number, the huge, overwhelming number of Star Wars fans around the world, every corner, they absolutely love the stories, which demonstrates that there must be something here. We must have some kernel of truth. Look, in the end, I guess I just don't know what I would do if there were no Force. What a terrible existence. The Force is what guides me, what teaches me, what protects me. Sorry, I got a little personal there. Hippie, wipe those tears away and get to work. All right, Sarge, maybe we'll rename you Fallacious Crumb. All right, and I think we're back. I hope anyone who's might be watching enjoyed that disaster. That was from live streams I used to do for a video game, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. And I used to have this character, the Sergeant, who basically was a warm-up for Afy, where except Sarge went in the other direction. He was Mr. Fallacy most of the time. Anyway, welcome back. Now, I won't keep you too much longer, but I did want to circle back to some of the conversations we were having earlier. Sure. The one question that I asked, I didn't want to start talking about then is about, we were talking about groups and tribalism, and I kind of brought up the police force. Do you think that perhaps some form of group cohesion, like a football team or something like that, might be going on in the police force due to the way it's set up? And certainly that perhaps may cause, certainly it may, maybe that would cause some of the problems that we're seeing. Perhaps not 100%, perhaps not 20%, maybe it adds to it.
Right. So I have to say, by the way, I hope that people watching either now or later will agree that you ask fantastic questions.
Oh, well, thank you. I steal them from... No, questions.
I don't. I don't always answer them, because you asked this before and I went on somewhere else. So I'll say this. I'll be a good skeptic and say, I don't know if, problems with police have to do with group cohesion, blah, blah, blah. But another question, related question, I'm going to bring these together.
Sure.
A related question that you asked me that I didn't answer was, what's good about theism, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that's good about it is that it encourages community.
Nice.
Right? And we are social creatures.
Mm-hmm.
We've evolved to be that way. Adam was not, if you believe in the whole Adam thing, Adam was not created with an ethos that relied upon community because there wasn't one, right? There's just him, right?
Fair enough.
We weren't created to be seekers of community, but we have evolved that way for all the reasons that, people who know more about evolutionary biology
Mm-hmm.
and sociology than I do will tell you. So here's the thing. And football teams are a great example. I have played competitive sports. Individual sports I'm okay with, but I like being on a team.
I competitively brought the athletes water competitively.
Yeah, right. Good for you. Someone has to do it. I like being on a team, and I used to be in my school band and choir, and I consider teaching to be largely about creating a community, right? That we are what Stanley Fish, the literary theorist, used to call an interpretive community. So here's the thing. That's a great thing about theism, and that's a great thing about, police departments and police forces.
Mm-hmm.
They need that cohesion, right?
Absolutely.
They need
It's
to be
important.
able to rely on one another.
Soldiers in a war.
To act out. Soldiers in a war, same thing. Here's the problem. Well, there are two. First problem is that obviously not every community that is formed is a good community in objective ways, right? Oh, look, it's a death cult. Well, that may not the best, the Manson family.
It's okay to offend Jim Jones and Charles Manson. That's okay. We can offend them.
Right. It was called the Manson family and not the Manson people, because there was group cohesion.
Yeah.
So problem one, not all communities are good. Problem two, which is related to all things I've said about Christianity, but now I'll say it about not all, but some police forces, and we've seen it in the shooting in Uvalde, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a cohesion that's built around solid values,
Mm-hmm.
and you believe in those values, and you behave according to those values. But there's something about some officers, and I would say, I think it's, about some police forces that also, or alternatively, cohere around the idea of the thin blue line and covering their asses, right? So that the group identity is, and this is true in Uvalde, those cops, their group identity was, we have to protect ourselves and our reputation.
Mm-hmm.
They had a SWAT, that police force had a fucking SWAT team. That police force had training on how to do breaches.
Mm-hmm.
That training included, look, if you're the solo officer, and there wasn't just a solo officer, but if you're the solo officer, you can't, in that situation, you can't wait for your brothers and sisters to show up.
A lot of the mums didn't, running in to saving their own children. I think I heard
the
of
mothers
a father
did,
doing
right?
it.
Because the mothers were committed to a community whose values were about more than just self-preservation. The mother who ran in, the cops were literally tasing parents who wanted to go in and try to rescue their kids. One woman, I hope people have seen the news, one woman actually got around the police, jumped a fence, ran in, grabbed her kids, ran out.
Mm-hmm.
With no gun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She just had a commitment to her community, her family.
Yeah.
The cops, in this instance at least, and we saw the same thing with the George Floyd thing. We see it, we've seen it so many times. I'm old enough to think back to Rodney King and the way that cops covered for each other. When when the noble aims of your community and the basis of its cohesion is corrupted to become only about one's self-preservation, that ain't a good community anymore.
I wonder if it doesn't, the police force, and like politics, certainly not everybody, maybe not even the majority, but I wonder if it doesn't attract the wrong sort of people. So, I'm obviously a terribly mean, angry bully who throws things. If I was like that, perhaps I'd like to do that for my life. If I was the sort of person that always wanted to tell other people what to do, wanted to have a lot of power, maybe I should go into politics. Perhaps these systems are set up in negative ways. Certainly comment on that if you like. You've mentioned morality and values several times. How do we come to morality in your mind?
Okay.
So
Can you remind me of the morality question after I say what I'm about to say about police?
I'll see what I can do, but I don't have much of a memory.
It is certainly true this will be quick, I hope. It's certainly true from what I know about, I have a very good friend who is a police officer in the city I live in. And she tells me about like how officers often, I wouldn't say often, they sometimes ignore their training. And she has explained to me that, at least for her police force, and I've heard this about other police forces across North America, you will not be trained and hired to be a cop if you test too smart.
Oh. Okay.
And the explanation that she tells me, the explanation isn't, oh, we want stupid people who just follow orders. It has more to do with as she says it, has more to do with the concern that smart people who get into police work will leave it fairly quickly when they realize this is not a good...
And then they lose money in training and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So the morality question, where do we get our morality and values? That was basically it.
Not necessarily where if you would like to, but we mentioned values in different circumstances. So what I generally see when I look around, perhaps incorrectly, is different people get their morality from different places. My idea is, well, it's certainly not mine, but the idea that I adhere to is more of, no, we can come to at least some version of morality, and I grabbed this from Sam Harris. And I want to get back to him a little bit later, but where should we get our morality from? If not the Bible, not the Quran, if morality is not subjective, which you may think it is.
Okay. So, of course, morality is subjective. We don't have time to get into that. It is.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about that then?
Yeah.
So when we say when I say morality is subjective, what I mean is different people believe different things. That is absolutely fact. The question might be...
I believe... Yeah, I'll refine that, at least from my point of view.
Please.
It isn't just different people believing different things. It is a person having different beliefs about the same thing in different contexts. Is it wrong to steal? I'm going to say yes. Is it wrong to steal a loaf of bread when my child is starving and is going to die? I don't want to get Kantian, categorical imperative, all that shit. But I would say, no, killing seems to me to be bad.
So what you're saying is there's nuance.
Killing, look, the kid who shot up that classroom and murdered 19 children and 2 teachers, his killing was wrong. But the killing of him...
If morality is subjective, I could say, and I do not feel this way.
Right.
I could say that no,
he
it
wasn't
isn't.
Wrong.
I could say if morality is subjective. But the problem there is, aren't I wrong when I say that? I would maintain that I am wrong.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
in saying that.
There are moral standards, and where do we derive those from? And I would say that our ultimate duties are to truth, because we don't get anywhere if we're not being truthful.
I'm sorry, we don't get anywhere from...
We don't get, if we're not being truthful, we don't get anywhere as a society. We don't have cohesion because we can't trust one another. You know,
Gotcha. Yep.
you can do the math on that.
Mhm.
But I think there are certain principles that we can say are, man, pretty close to objective standards.
Mhm.
I would say not even pursuing truth, but being truthful.
Trying.
That's like, trying. Yeah, that's fair. Trying.
Mhm.
That's, I think, objectively moral, or an objective moral standard of sorts. Of course, you can have a mental illness in which you don't know what the truth is. You know, there are caveats, of course.
Absolutely.
But certainly we prioritize behaviors. I'll just say behaviors. I won't say thoughts and behaviors.
Mhm.
We prioritize behaviors by often instinctively, which I'm going to get to, by testing them against those moral standards.
Okay.
And saying, can this standard be elasticized a bit? And the example that I am going to get to the categorical imperative now, Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant has, so many people have said this is not original to me at all.
Mhm.
One of Kant's categorical imperatives. Categorical imperative means you have to do it.
Something you can't do. Yes.
You're right. You can't disobey the categorical imperative. And one of the categorical imperatives is kind of what I just said, being honest.
Mm-hmm.
But the question gets asked, what happens when, I hate to bring up Nazis, but I had to do it. It's
Bring
just
them.
a good example.
Bring them.
What happens when you're living in Germany in 1942 or 43,
Mm-hmm.
and you're hiding your Jewish neighbors in your attic,
Mm-hmm.
and the SS comes to your door and says, are you hiding your Jewish neighbors in your attic?
Do you lie or not is the question.
The categorical imperative is you have to tell the truth.
Yes, if it's an imperative.
But that's obviously a faulty imperative because it is outweighed by the responsibility to care for the welfare of others. And I was going to say a few minutes ago when you asked the question about morals,
Mm-hmm.
how do you define moral? And one of the ways that Sam Harris defines it
Mm-hmm.
is as acting out of consideration for the what's the word he uses?
He generally uses well-being.
The well-being. That's it. That's exactly it. He says acting out of concern for the well-being of others. Now, let's call that a categorical imperative.
Okay.
And let's call the don't lie a categorical imperative. Now you have two categorical imperatives that can be in conflict in some instances.
Absolutely. So
Then you have to
calculus.
make a decision. Then you have to make a decision, and this is what separates stupid people from smart people. They can do the math. They can, to go back to my worn-out analogy, they can use the can opener of their rational thought to discern that one thing is better than the other without saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which, by the way, the golden rule, which is flawed anyhow. You shouldn't do unto others as you want them to do unto you. You should do unto others as they would want to be done unto.
Yes, that is a better phrase.
If I like being kicked in the balls incessantly, I shouldn't assume that you enjoy that.
You're talking to the right guy.
So, there was one other thing I was going to say. Morality, maybe it's not even important. Morality. Oh, the other thing is this, because you were asking in a way, where does it come from? And I gave an example actually on Twitter yesterday, the day before. Mm-hmm. I was leaving work, and I was climbing up a flight of stairs. It is a flight of 13 stairs, then a flight of 14 stairs, quite steep, mm-hmm. and tiled, very hard surface. And about 5 steps from the top, maybe, and I see this cute little boy who was between 2 and 3, closer to 2. Mm-hmm. And he was he was toddling. He was tottering toward the top of the stairs. And I saw no adult in sight. Mm-hmm. So I sort of leapt up the last 5 steps, and I placed my hand on his chest mm-hmm. to steady him And eventually along came what I presume is his parent.
Mhm.
Now, a minute later, I say this in my Twitter thread. A minute later, I'm now outside, I'm on a sidewalk, and I see a quite severely disabled man in a power chair trying to board a bus. The little ramp comes down, and he's trying to get up this little ramp to get on the bus,
Mhm.
and it's obvious that his chair doesn't have the juice to do it. So I ask him, do you mind if I help you?
Mhm.
And he couldn't speak. He was nonverbal, but he said what I interpreted to be, yeah, please help me.
Please get
So
away from me, sir. But yeah, I helped him. Yeah, sorry.
I pushed, blah, 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 and I got him on, and then I left I let him be.
Mhm.
Now, as I said, the point of this in my thread was neither of those acts in such proximity,
Mhm.
neither of those is evidence that I'm a good person. I acted instinctively because I have evolved. It is 100% instinct that I acted upon. I didn't think about it. I didn't have to do the moral calculus of, oh, what would Jesus do? Or I didn't have to think. I did think enough about the guy in the wheelchair to wonder, I shouldn't just push the guy. I need to ask him if it's okay if I do.
So wait a
But I
minute.
didn't have to refer to ancient texts. I didn't have to do any of that thinking.
If
We have
that's-
evolved to do well to one another.
If
do
that's
good to
not
one
an
another.
example of you being a good person, are there examples of being a good person? What would they look like?
Those are probably good. Those are probably examples of being a good person.
Okay.
But okay, so those are things that I felt obliged to do,
Mhm.
right? So in that sense, I'd be like, oh, I was doing what anyone else would have done. I was just doing my duty. So now I'll give you an example of what I would. It's going to sound arrogant, or who cares?
My viewers are
young
used
daughter-
to arrogance.
What's that?
My viewers are used to arrogance. You're good. You're good.
Oh, you get lots of it from me. My young daughter, who's 11 and a half, and I, we go once a week to this cafe bakery near her school and get like a hot chocolate and a donut or whatever, blah, blah. And God, a few years ago, before the whole pandemic lockdown stuff, by the way, this is I don't know if you can see it, this is my tattoo of my pet name for my daughter. Her real name is Martha, but I call her Snartha for some
Snartha.
reason. And that's a blow up of her. So I call her Snartha. We don't know why. But her homemade Christmas card a couple years ago was Snappy Snismas Snatty. We just add sn to everything. So I
Okay.
blew up her actual printing and got a tattoo.
Oh, very
Anyhow,
nice.
so
very nice.
Snartha and I are at this bakery, and we're standing at the counter, and we see this young couple, very young parents.
Mhm.
They couldn't have been 20. They couldn't. I would guess they were not 18. And they're with their toddler, and they are ordering whatever they're ordering. And my daughter and I had seen them many times and remarked, "Oh my God, they're so cute. Their baby's so cute. They're such cute. Oh, they're so cute." And so they ordered whatever they ordered, and the person at the counter said, "Okay, it's going to be whatever it was, $52.39. Well, who cares?
Mhm.
Could have been a nickel. Could have been $100." I said, "You know what? If it's okay with you," to the parents, "I'm going to get this time." And they're like, "Why?" I said, "You know what? My daughter and I have seen you. Seems like such a lovely family. Gonna do it." So they were very grateful. That whole thing. I said, "No, it's okay. I'm not. You don't have to thank me. I just have a great day. You guys are a cute little family. I wanted you to know that." And so I then get my order for my daughter and I, and we go and we sit down. So she would have been 7, 8 at the time, I guess. And she asked me, "Well, why did you do that?" And I said, "You know what? Sometimes it's just nice to be nice to people, right? With no sense of obligation, not even with the sense that you will get, that you'll receive any gratitude for what you're doing." So I said,
Altruism.
this is part of my duty as a parent to educate my kids about this, because as much as morality
point.
is instinctive, moral behavior is also learned. So I explained this to my daughter, and the moral of the story was, you know what? Be nice to people. Don't expect anything in return. That isn't the point. We're back there the next week, and we order whatever we order, and I haul up my wallet to pay, and the person, Jen at the counter, said, no, this one is on us. I'm like, "What? Why?" She said, well, after what you did last week, the staff got together and we're talking about it after work. And we're like, he should be rewarded in some way for that. So I got it for free. So when Martha and I got our stuff and went and sat down, and I thanked them, I said it wasn't necessary, but thanks. At first I tried not to accept, but they insisted. I didn't want to insult them by not accepting. So I went and sat with my daughter and said, remember what happened last week? And you asked me, why'd you do that? And I said, it's nice to do nice things for people without expecting anything in return. This, the free snack that we got that afternoon,
That's the something in return.
this is a sign that they believe the same thing, because they had no obligation to return the favor that I'd done for someone else to me.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like the pay it forward thing. Which
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
to some
of.
extent, but that's what it is. But it's about, short answer, we have evolved with certain moral instincts. We can override them or ignore them, or follow them according in part to our nature. If you're cognitively compromised, maybe you can't, that happens. But we have these things instinctively, but it's what we learn, or it's also what we learn, not just what our teachers tell us, not what the Bible says, but what we observe when we act and move in the world. We can learn when to act upon those moral standards, those, there's no categorical imperative to buy someone their donuts, right?
Certainly not.
There's no categorical imperative to be nice to people.
No, I don't think so.
That's a personal imperative, not a categorical imperative. But we learn, it's a combination of instinct and evolution, and I'm sure other people smarter than I, or more knowledgeable in this field than I, they would say that, hey, look, if you're in a bad enough state that you need to have your book and your God tell you how to behave and how to treat other people well, rather than being able to do it yourself, by all means, fucking memorize your Bible and go to church 24/7.
Because we're scared of what's going to happen if you don't.
But here's the thing. This gets back to your earlier question about communities and cohesion and police forces and tribalism. These things are all related. This is, I think we're nearing the end, and this is bringing a lot of those things together.
Absolutely.
Right? That tribalism can be used to good and bad effects as well, right? At some point, because there is such a thing as looking out for your family, looking out for your clan.
Yes.
Now, are there ways to act upon tribalism that are not good? Of course. Are there ways to act upon that are good? Of course. Mom running in and grabbing her kids. What separates us from the moral equivalent of the baby with the can opener who starves to death, which I've used as kind of an example of stupidity. What separates us from them, and I am including Christian evangelical apologists in the them here, separates us from the baby with the can opener, is that we actually not only know how to use a can opener, but we think about using it.
Whereas they're not. The baby has no concept of the can opener.
And you didn't raise this question, but it was implicit in a lot of what you said around this. Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah. That's a
what are you going to do? And Sam Harris, this has become the Sam Harris tribute show, but Sam Harris says this very eloquently. How do you reason with the person who is incapable of or unwilling to reason?
Well, I think the problem is inherent in the question. It's not that they're incapable of, it's that they haven't learned how. So, for example, I have not learned how to skydive.
Right.
It's like, he can never skydive. How could you possibly get him to sky? Well, you'd have to teach him. Actually, that still wouldn't work, so it's a terrible example because I still wouldn't be skydiving. But let's pivot on that Sam Harris for the very last
Can I just
question.
add one very quick thing to that? It's very, very quick.
You got it.
I would maybe it's semantics here, but I would just slightly refine what you said about,
Sure.
They haven't learned how to do it, maybe?
Yes.
They haven't learned how to use their can opener, parachute, whatever?
Mhm.
Sure. But I think that in many instances, and particularly ones involving dogmatic tribalism or tribal dogmatism, it isn't just not learning how to do it, it's learning not to do it.
Well, I think you hit it on the first place with Dunning-Kruger. So I think what happens is, in these tribes, name any one you want. It really doesn't matter. Religious, political, it really does not matter. What's happening is people, in my opinion, people have been taught this is the way to think about this.
This is the way.
Instead of being taught this is the way to think. So if I could make maybe a better analogy, I don't know anything about painting, so it's probably not going to be a better analogy. But if I were to say something like, "Oh, I need you to paint this in a particular style from the Renaissance or something like that,"
whatever.
Impressionist, sure. If someone were to ask me to do that, I would have no concept. Even if they showed me that style, like another painting of that style, I still don't know what I'm doing. The difference here is that people think they can paint. That's the problem. I think I can paint. So let me leave the analogy because I'm losing the metaphor here, but we think throughout our entire lives. We make choices throughout our entire lives. We decide what we believe and don't believe. The issue is, how many of us are aware that's a subject? Like math. This is a subject. There is a way to do it. This is the basis of all subjects. And
of course,
thinking that I can paint without having studied painting or paintings or painters is a problem. But I wanted to stick with Sam Harris.
I have to add one.
Please do. Go for it.
Don't quick. I can't remember exactly how you
poorly.
What your
poorly is the way I worded it.
That point was, but you said someone asking you to paint in a certain style.
Sure.
Was it something that you said?
Yeah.
When you said that, I agree, but I want to refine it a bit. It isn't just being asked to paint like an impressionist or an expressionist, whatever. It's being told what to paint. Right? So you're not thinking about how do I paint like Monet. You are just on autopilot, like the dog told to stay off the couch. You are looking at a Monet painting and just copying it without understanding that it's an impressionist work, because you're not thinking about what you're doing it. You're just doing what you've been told.
I think maybe you've misunderstood my analogy. Perhaps I misworded it. I'm saying that people need to study painting to be good painters. People need to study medicine to be good doctors.
Yeah.
People need to study math to be mathematicians, and so on, and so on, and so on. The difference here is that we don't do this in the area of critical thinking. I don't need to study critical thinking to be a critical thinker. Well, Tiger, use that in any other area of life. So maybe the painting example was bad in terms of a Renaissance example. What I mean is a person has never studied the Renaissance style paintings, has never studied any style of paintings, and thinks they're a good painter. That's the analogy that I'm trying to draw. People have studied philosophy, but also the thing with a lot of people who study philosophy, myself included, is that we don't learn a lot of philosophy. Now, bear with me for a second.
I'm an advocate, by the way, for teaching critical thinking throughout, if not elementary school, then middle school and high school.
I'm elementary school. My point was going to be that in philosophy classes, largely, not only, we read about philosophers. But this is a little strange.
But we're not taught how to philosophize. Yeah.
But we're not taught philosophy. When I studied math, I learned about Pythagoras as well. But I didn't learn a lot about him. Guy was a bit crazy and probably started a cult. C squared equals A squared plus B squared. When you study physics,
it isn't just all about the biography of Sir Isaac Newton.
Yes.
You learn how to employ the method.
Yes.
Right? And we do not learn how to employ that method. Although I would say this. When it comes to philosophy, I'm speaking with very little knowledge.
Okay.
But I think I'm a pretty good critical thinker.
I think we all do.
unlike the physics calculations that allow a rocket or a satellite to orbit the Earth or whatever, those physical those physics methodologies, calculations, all those things, you have to learn those. They are not, we don't intuit the coefficiency of friction given various surfaces, right? Although we can say,
looks like a 0.089 to me.
This ice, right? This ice is likely to be more slippery than that Velcro.
Sure. I
would say that when it comes to critical thinking, stepping back from a purely philosophical point of view, it's important to remember that the roots, the foundations, the bases of critical thinking are largely founded. I mean, in a really simple foundational way, they are largely founded on our intuitions and our observation of certain behaviors in certain contexts in a way that doesn't require schooling, right? I don't need to be a trauma surgeon to have watched that 2-year-old kid fall down the stairs and see that his arm is bent at a horribly bad angle at the wrong place, and there's blood. I know there's something wrong without being an EMT.
Absolutely,
right?
But there is an important distinction.
And critical thinking is like that, but I agree, we have to teach critical thinking.
So I think you're right, but I think there's an important distinction there. Yes, I think in a lot of ways you can intuit critical thinking. Let's go back to the appeal to ignorance fallacy. I think if people were to sit down and think about it, I don't know what else it could be, therefore it's this. I think a lot of people would understand that, yes, that's fallacious. The issue would be how many people sit down and think about it. So yeah, the point that I think needs to be added here though is testing, right? Like, just because I can intuit something and think, oh, okay, that sounds intelligent to me, doesn't necessarily make it so. And, peer review and so on and such forth, this is where all this stuff comes from. I share my ideas, you tell me why they're dumb. I change my ideas, you tell me why they're dumb. I change them again, and I learn.
Here's a book that I often use in my first-year classes, which this isn't a plug, but it's a useful book.
Attacking...
The problem is that it's
fallacious reasoning? Faulty reasoning.
Faulty reasoning by, I can't see the name on the back cover.
IP
The only problem is, this isn't a plug. It's incredibly expensive. This copy, which is, it's 228 pages, softback.
228 pages of an expensive book. Or like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Well, yeah, exactly. And even I went on Amazon the other day because I'd recommended the book to someone, and two stale dated editions from 2 or 3 editions of the book ago are going for $200-$300. So I don't recommend the book, but I recommend finding some resource. If you can't take a university class, finding some reliable resource that isn't me and you talking on YouTube to learn about these things. It's so important. It's so important to overcoming many of the obstacles that we face as a society.
You're getting the fireworks again, whether you can hear them or not. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. We were supposed to do this for an hour. It's been...
You had a Sam Harris point. Can you ask it quickly? Or
I can. I don't know if it's a quick question or a quick answer, but the question was going to be, you had mentioned at the beginning, and I'm surprised I remember anything ever, really. But anyway, you had mentioned at the beginning that Sam Harris kind of went a little bit loopy. Prior to you mentioning that, I was going to bring up I had planned to bring up the word spirituality and ask you about it specifically in terms of, what you think about it, about atheism, so on and such forth. And then when you brought up the Sam Harris going a little bit weird, I was going to ask if that was it. So I guess, like always, pick your question and answer it.
No, I think Sam Harris and I would agree that, maybe for different reasons, I can't recall his reasons, but he and I would agree that spirituality is an incredibly murky term. Doesn't have a lot of meaning.
I can agree to that.
But I thought that long before I ever, heard about Sam Harris. It just, it is, I'd almost, in a way, this is going to be kind of cold and cynical, but I'd almost compare it to agnosticism in a way. as the thing that
mind
people
blown. I'm sorry.
who probably are atheists say when they can't quite bring themselves to say they're an atheist.
I'm sorry. Can you define agnosticism for me?
Again,
You made my head skip a beat there.
So if again, I'm not giving you the Cambridge encyclopedia.
Just the way you use the
I'm
word.
going to say, just as atheism is the lack of belief in gods and God systems and in God beliefs, agnosticism is the absence of knowledge of whether it's true.
I agree completely. Now
so
can
you
you
be a Gnostic atheist or an agnostic atheist, right?
I
Some people
completely
will
agree.
claim, I know there isn't a God, I'm a Gnostic atheist.
Yeah.
Most atheists, I think, would say, I don't know.
I call myself
So I'm
an agnostic atheist. But now can you go back to the comparison you made between
Yep.
spirituality and agnosticism? That's where you lost me. So I wanted to make sure we were defining terms similarly. We are.
So both of those terms can be defined. But I'm, how can I say this? When I invoked spirituality and agnosticism together and compared them, I wasn't talking about their prescriptive meaning. Look in the dictionary, what does it mean? I was talking about their descriptive meaning. That is how people speak about their own beliefs.
Oh.
And the comparison I was making, the way I think that they're similar, is that I think both of them are fuzzy or weak statements.
What is fuzzy
position.
or weak about saying I don't know?
No, sorry. Let me clarify.
Okay.
There's nothing weak about saying I don't know. But my point was more that just as many people will claim not to be religious but to be spiritual, many people, I shouldn't say many, in my experience, some decent number of people who are probably actually atheists are somewhat, and it's you can understand why, they are reluctant to call themselves atheists.
Yep.
So they'll call themselves agnostic instead. So what I'm saying is that in that case, those people, and I don't think it's intentional, I think those people are not using the word.
I agree
agnostic.
with that. If you say, do you believe in God, and someone says, I'm agnostic, that is a failure of understanding the question.
It doesn't
answer the question. But, words are descriptive and not prescriptive. So I completely agree with you about spirituality. I think, and I think this is a topic probably for a video that I'll make at some stage. It seems to me, from the little that I know about these spiritual leaders, that I think if I listen very, very charitably, I actually agree with kind of what I think they might be saying. The biggest problem I have with a lot of what they're saying is what they're saying. If you wake up and grow your consciousness, shut up. What are you talking about? I would like to be awake and to become more aware. What is this? What does it exactly mean? Speak in terms of a subject, please, like psychology or philosophy, right, or make up another subject and show me why I should follow it. It sounds wooey to me, but maybe it's just because I haven't listened to the right woo master.
One of the ways that this is often, I think, I agree with everything, and now I'm just going to sort of take what you said and feed it right back in kind of from the opposite direction.
Sure.
It's everything that you said, yes, I agree. But you can also feed it back the other way and say that people attribute spirituality to processes in a very willy-nilly way. For instance, meditation.
Yep.
I've seen the studies.
Lots of benefits of meditation.
Things that, what's that?
Lots of benefits of meditation.
Tons and tons and tons. But has nothing to do with whatever spirituality is. And my minor, I should have said this at the beginning. Not only was I raised hardcore Catholic, my my minor for my bachelor's degree was in religious studies. So I say to theists I talk to, look, I know this stuff not just from the, sitting in church point of view, but I also know it from a scholarly perspective as well. Am I perfect and do I have complete knowledge in both? No, of course.
Who is?
But one of the courses I took, which I really enjoyed, was as part of my minor, was called Psychology of Religion. And we read the studies of, I'm going to forget now. I think it's beta, could be alpha waves. I can't remember which. But studies of prayer. They would study people, I don't know, stick them in an MRI. I don't know how they measured it. But they could see that people in a meditative state could achieve the same, the same wave pattern as people who engaged in deep prayer. Now, prayer and meditation are not the same thing. There are objective reasons to meditate. There are. It's very good for you to be. I used to do cognitive-based meditation, CBMT. I had to stop because I just would fall asleep all the time.
I actually pronounce it differently, but I do it all the time as well. Meditate.
CBT, yeah. Now, meditation and prayer, I would say, are different. But how can I say this? They can lead you to the same state. What I would consider to be a mistake, and a spiritual or religious person would not, is I can meditate and explain its benefits with reference to my own brain state. People who are spiritual or religious will discuss those or frame the same idea
outside
but
of them,
with reference not just to their brain state, but to some larger power. And which I think is, as a skeptic, I think hasn't been proven. Prove it.
I completely agree with you. Literally down to the word, hasn't yet been shown correct.
Yeah,
I feel
I'll believe.
Similarly about my atheism towards spirituality. If you want me to believe in whatever it is that you're claiming, it doesn't matter what it is, you need to show me good reasons to believe in those things. That's what being a skeptic means to me. So, yeah.
It's the Aaron Roth thing. Very quickly, Aaron Roth says this.
Aaron, I believe, but yeah.
If you can't show it, you don't know it.
That's a good point, too. And even as an educator, if you can't explain something like a very young person could understand, you probably don't know it well enough, which is what happened to me in quantum physics.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to leave you there. I've taken way too much of your time tonight, sir.
I've taken too much of yours. I've talked too much. I'm sorry. Please have me back. I can't promise not to talk less, but I hope you can tell, I hope your viewers can tell, I really enjoyed this.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I hope they really enjoyed it. I'm glad you really enjoyed it. If you would like, I'm going to run the outro, which is like, I don't know, a minute, 30 seconds or something like that, then stop the video and we can have a quick chat there after. If you want to run away, I will say you are just like every other woman in my life, and I understand it completely. So, otherwise...
a woman? Yeah. Let's talk 10 minutes after your outro.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a good one. I'm going to break this up into 3 parts, I think, and maybe release it in videos. Thanks for popping in for the view. I really appreciate it. Big shout out to Professor Flynn, and I'll catch you next time.